Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari Gopi Jana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Parivrajaka Charja Stotra Satachi Srimad, His Divine Grace of Light, and Bhakti Samashara Prabhupada Ki. ISKCON BBT Pandacharya, save the whole world, Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jai Nitya Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa, Parivrajaka Charja. Asto Tarasata Srimad, His Divine Grace of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda Ki. Nama Charja Sri Haridas Thakur Ki. Premzika Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Gaura Bhakti. Sri Radha Krishna Govardhana Shamakund Radha Kundgiri Govardhana Ki. Braj Bhumi Shivindama Dama Ki. Navadvik Mayapur Dama Ki. Purusham Chetra Jagadapuri Dama Ki. Ganga Mai Ki. Jamuna Mai Ki. Bhakti Devi Ki. Tulasi Maharani Ki. Samaveta Bhakti Ki. Jai Nitai Go Premanandi. All glories to Samaveta. All glories to Samaveta. All glories to Samaveta. All glories, Lord, be to Sri Guru and Sri Garanga. All glories to Prabhupada Ki. Jai Lord Vishnu Padaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tapasa Vidyaya Yukto. Tapasa Vidyaya Yukto. Tapasa Vidyaya Yukto. Yogena Susamadina. Yogena Susamadina. Yogena Susamadina. Tapasa Vidyaya Yukto. Yogena Susamadina. Rishin Rishi Rishikesha. Rishin Rishi Rishikesha. Rishin Rishi Rishikesha. Sasaja Vimata. Praja. Sarsaja Bhavimata. Sarsaja Bhavi. Sarsaja Vimata Praja. Sarsaja Vimata Praja. Rishin Rishi Rishikesha. Sarsaja Vimata. responsibly. Having equipped himself with austere penance, adoration, mental concentration, and absorption in devotion, accompanied by dispassion, and having controlled his senses, Brahma, the self-born living creature, evolved great sages as his beloved sons. Purport. The ritualistic performances of sacrifices are meant for material economic development. In other words, they are meant to keep the body in good condition for cultivation of spiritual knowledge. But for actual attainment of spiritual knowledge, other qualifications are needed. What is essential is vidya, or worship of the Supreme Lord. Sometimes the word yoga is used to refer to the gymnastic performances of different bodily postures which help mental concentration. Generally, the different bodily postures in the yoga system are accepted by less intelligent men to be the end of yoga, but actually they are meant to concentrate the mind upon the Supersoul. After creating persons for economic development, Brahma created sages who would set the example for spiritual realization. So this is obviously, this section here is talking about Brahma's creation of the Saja, and it goes through different stages of development. And actually, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the verse, I think it's where he creates the Manus, that's the last thing he does. So it's actually, according to him, this is out of order. Yeah, here it is. It mentions ante, which means at the end. So finally, it mentions actually finally he created the Manus. But that's not really a problem, because the Bhagavatam is not a chronological scripture. It's actually more thematic. It develops different themes. But he does mention here that finally he created the Manus. And we see that the Devatas and others who were there at that time, that they were very happy. Oh, now you've created Manu. And actually, also Jiva Goswami mentions this creation of Manus, or it says Manun, actually refers to Swayambhuva Manu and Shatarupa. They were created at that point. Because he says the others it wasn't necessary for the others to be in existence at that point. They came later. So when Swayambhuva Manu was created, Swayambhuva Manu and Satarupa were created, then the performance of various types of sacrifice also began, and this meant that they could actually enjoy. They could partake in the fruits of the sacrifice, and therefore they were very happy with that. But as we see here in this purport, that Srila Prabhupada mentions that these ritualistic performances are actually meant for material economic development. They're actually meant for the satisfaction of the senses. And ultimately, these rituals will not bring us to the stage of love of Godhead. It will not bring us to the stage of the ultimate goal of life, which is love of Godhead. And so they are necessary, but they're not the end. And this is the point that Prabhupada makes when sometimes less intelligent persons, when they do yoga, they think this is the end. This is the ultimate conclusion of what we're doing here. But and Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out this word yogena used here in this purport refers to Astanga Yoga. So as we know, there's Astanga means 8, Astanga, 8 limbs. And it means yama, niyama, asan, pranayam, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Yeah? So, yama niyama basically means sense control, to control the senses, to control the activities. And then asan means to perform various types of postures. And by performing these postures, it brings us to the point of dharana, to be able to remember the Supreme. And then I actually had them all written down here because I don't remember them so well. pranayama means breathing exercises. So with the breathing exercises, one's able to bring the life airs under control, because the life airs are excessively active in the body sometimes, especially when someone's influenced by the mode of passion, or sometimes you see people have disturbed life airs. Like someone who's I don't want to say crazy, but it's a bit of a heavy statement to make, but someone whose mind is disturbed. And generally you'll find this is because of an agitation of the life airs. But when through pranayama and things like this, you can bring the life airs under control, and one can become more peaceful. And then he talks about pratyahara. So pratyahara is interesting. It's an interesting word. It means just the opposite. So with the first like 4 steps, this is talking about the senses, engaging the senses positively. And pratyahara is the opposite of that. It means rejecting the senses, rejecting how the senses want to take us in this material world. And we see it's a natural thing that when the senses see an object, or there's an object near the senses, it's like a magnet. You put a negative and a positive pole of a magnet next to each other, and they're automatically drawn really, really quickly. And so when the senses come into contact with the object, the mind is drawn to that, and the mind wants to go to that. But pratyahara means rejecting that. I'm not going to be connected. I'm not going to be drawn by the objects of the senses. So not becoming distracted, because this is one of the problems. And Krishna explains this to Arjuna in the Gita, how because he says what's that? It's in the 3rd chapter, I think, where he's talking about lust and how what is one impelled to the objects of the senses, and he says it seems like it's by force. We're drawn to these objects, and we can't refrain from this. And he explains to Arjuna, he says it's just by lust. When we're influenced by passion, then lust, greed, avarice, all these different things, they manifest. And so the living entity is just automatically drawn to that because of the influence of the modes of material nature. Because of our conditioning, because of our karma, we're drawn to these things automatically. So the idea of pratyahara is to become steady in our focus, and not be distracted by all the various objects of the senses which are constantly coming into view and going away. It's just a constant thing in this material world. And we'll see how the modes of nature are constantly influencing us in different ways. So pratyahara means getting to the point of being beyond that influence. So we're no longer influenced by the effects of the modes of material nature. And then dharana, this means to start to contemplate. Who am I? Who is God? What's the relationship? What's the material nature? Contemplate all these things around us. And this is why we perform yoga, is to steady the mind so we can start, because if the mind is not steady, how do we contemplate? Because it's constantly going to be attacked by the senses, by the various objects. The senses are coming along, and the senses will say, you should enjoy this. You should look at this. This is very tasty. You should, and so this is the nature of the conditioned self, and how the conditioned senses, how they're influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance, especially, and they push the self to want to engage in enjoying the sense objects. And so the idea of dharana, when the mind becomes peaceful, when the mind becomes steady, when the intelligence is withdrawn from the senses, dharana means to start to focus, to contemplate. Who am I? What's my purpose here? And we see that this is Sanatana Goswami when he met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What did he say to him? He says, Kayame tapotraya. Who am I? Why am I suffering the burning threefold miseries? This is contemplative. He's looking at what is my situation in this material world, and why am I experiencing these difficulties? So this is what dharana is about, is to try to understand the situation in this material world. And then next comes dhyan. Dhyan basically means to meditate, or to become internally contemplative on the self and on the spiritual nature. And not just only to be contemplative, but to engage in service. In deity worship, for instance, before we engage in the Bahya Puja, or the physical worship, there's what is called the preliminary worship. And in that preliminary worship, we engage in, the first thing we do is Dham Dhyan. We meditate upon the Lord's place. Then we meditate upon the Lord situated in that place. So we meditate on, like you start off the worship with Prakta Srimad, you meditate on the form of the Guru, how he's got 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 ears, like that, and we meditate on his form. Then we engage in worshipping that form in that place. And then you'll do Navadvip Dhyam, and so you meditate upon the Dham, how it's very beautiful. It's like the back of a gigantic tortoise, showing you see how the tortoise got all those divisions in it. It's like the many rivers that are there in the Dham, rivers and canals and things like that in Mayapur Dham. And then you meditate on all these beautiful palatial houses, and there's wonderful situation in how there's Krishna Kirtan, ecstatic Krishna Kirtan is always going on in these houses. And anyone who's ever spent any time in Mayapur, you'll see this is one of the constant things that happens in Mayapur, is there's always Kirtan going on. And not just in the temple, but in devotees' houses, they'll have this program, that program. They're just friends coming over, they're having kirtan. Always there's kirtan going on in these houses in the Dham. So we meditate upon the Dham, and then we meditate upon Lord Chaitanya, situated in the Dham, how he's got his beautiful eyes, his hair, which is wrapped with pearls, and then so once this becomes fixed, this idea of becoming fixed in the consciousness, then you worship the Lord in that situation. And then we see there's many nice descriptions, for instance, in the third canto, I think it is, with Dhruva Maharaj, that Narad Muni described to him the form of the Lord and explained to him how we have to fix the form of the Lord in the mind and then worship the form of the Lord in the mind. Also, we see that the same thing is there in the 10th chapter of the Nectar of Devotion. It talks about meditation, and it describes the story of the Brahmana and the sweet rice, how he would take his bath in the Godavari, and then he would sit down, he would meditate upon the Lord. When he fixed the form of the Lord in his mind, then he would start to worship the Lord in his mind. And this we see there's many interesting pastimes where great devotees have been absorbed, so much absorbed in this meditation of the form of the Lord and serving the Lord in the mind, that it actually becomes a transcendental reality for them. Just like we see with this Brahman and the sweet rice. He's meditating upon on the form of the Lord. He's making sweet rice for the Lord. He's allowing it to cool down. But one day he was thinking, well, maybe the sweet rice is not cool enough. And he put his finger in the sweet rice to test it, and his finger became burnt. Not just in the meditation, but it became physically burnt. So when one becomes absorbed in meditation like this, it actually becomes, it's not just daydreaming. It's not like that at all. One's actually there, present in the Lord's pastimes. And we see the same as there with these wonderful stories of Sanatana Goswami, so many different pastimes that are described in the scriptures, how the devotees are actually present there in pastimes with the Lord, even though they may externally seem to be situated here in this material world. And this is when one gets this position of actually experiencing this exchange of understanding who they are, understanding that they're an eternal servant of Krishna, not this body, and then being deeply engaged in service like this to the Lord. This is called samadhi. There's an interesting description from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary on the Nectar of Devotion, chapter 8. If you don't mind, I'll read it. In the neophyte stage, one should always engage in hearing Krishna Katha. This is called Shravana Das, the stage of hearing. By constantly hearing the transcendental holy name of Krishna and hearing of his transcendental form, qualities and pastimes, one can attain to the stage of acceptance called Varana Das. So it means we're accepting the transcendental nature of Krishna, we're accepting the transcendental nature of the name, but also we're accepting the process of bhakti. This is called Varana Das. When one attains this stage, he becomes attached to the hearing of Krishna Katha. And there's that verse in the Bhagavatam, that there's Vasudeva Katha Ruchi, that when one becomes attached to hearing about Krishna, then many qualities manifest in the heart. When one is able to chant in ecstasy, he attains the stage of Smaranavasta, the stage of remembering. Recollection, absorption, meditation, constant remembrance and trance are the 5 items of progressive Krishna Smarana. At first, remembrance of Krishna may be interrupted at intervals, but later, remembrance proceeds uninterrupted. When remembrance is uninterrupted, it becomes concentration and is called meditation. When meditation expands and becomes constant, it is called anusmriti. By uninterrupted and unceasing anusmriti, one enters the stage of samadhi or spiritual trance. So this is a very, very elevated stage. After smaranadas or samadhi has fully developed, the soul comes to understand his original position. At that time, he can perfectly and clearly understand his eternal relationship with Krishna. This is called sampatidas, or the perfection of life. And we see here that in this verse it says susamadhina. So it's not just samadhi, but actually very, very advanced meditation, very, very advanced contemplation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is, Brahma, it's described previously how he became satisfied. He sat down, and he absorbed himself in meditation, and now he's really going deep within his practice, within his sadhana. And it's saying here how he equipped himself with austere penance, adoration, mental concentration, absorption and devotion, accompanied by dispassion. So he's not attached to the outcome. And we see that Krishna is explaining this again to Arjuna in the 3rd chapter, how you have the right to perform your activities, but you should never consider yourself the doer of the activity, nor should you be attached to the outcome. We just do our practice, whatever our duty is in devotional service, and just leave the results up to Krishna. Because we can, you know what it's like in this material world. I mean, how many times have we had the experience that we try to do something, we have a particular outcome in mind, and it just doesn't work out? I mean, practically every day it's like that. It just doesn't work out the way we think it should. Just like yesterday, I was trying to do something on the van that I have, and like I was trying to run a power cable, and I thought, oh, good, I can put it through there, And so then I pulled everything apart to see where I can put it, and then I realized I can't do that because it doesn't go where I thought it went. So it's just like that. Practically speaking, every day we have these experiences where we have this idea, we want to do something, and the outcome is just beyond my control. And as we progress in devotional service, we come to realize more and more how the outcome of everything is completely dependent upon Krishna's will. Because without Krishna's will, we can't even breathe. We can't even wake up, and we can't do anything without Krishna's will. And this is the contemplation of an advanced devotee, is how everything. And Prabhupada would say this: that not a blade of grass moves without the sanction of the Lord. So as we become more and more attached to Krishna, which naturally brings about this detachment from material nature, more and more we realize how that everything that's happening to me is just going on by the will of the Lord. It's just beyond my control. Completely beyond my control. Because then you start to contemplate the nature of the living entity within inside the body, and you realize we're actually atomic. We're so tiny inside this body. How can this tiny atomic spirit spark motivate this entire body? It's only through the agency of the supersoul. Because the supersoul is situated in the heart. The supersoul is actually the one that's energizing the body. The living entity simply has this position of desiring, and the Lord, out of His mercy, enables that desire to be fulfilled. Sometimes He doesn't. So it is. We actually, as we contemplate more and more our situation in this material world, we realize how we cannot, how we're completely helpless. How we're completely dependent upon the mercy of Krishna. And so that's a very important point for devotees to understand. So we see here how Brahma, he's become, as Prabhupada points out here in the purport, the richest performance is just about maintenance of the material body. We perform ritual, and we see how Krishna says to Arjuna, how he sent forth generations of demigods, and along with the generations of demigods, he sent sacrifice. He said, "Be thou happy with this sacrifice. Perform the sacrifice, become happy." Because when you become satisfied materially, if you're intelligent, if you're not intelligent, you'll just indulge yourself in all this material facility and think, great, good life. But one who's intelligent understands what the sacrifice is for. Ultimately, the sacrifice is meant for pleasing the Supreme Personality of God, because yajna means the Lord of Sacrifice. This Lord of Sacrifice is Krishna. The purpose of sacrifice is to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So someone who's intelligent understands that, and you'll see that when they do fire yajnas, especially in Mayapur, you'll see every time they offer an oblation, they'll chant a mantra. And one of the mantras they chant is Idam Krishna, Idam Namama. This is for Krishna, this is not for me. This is the mood of the devotee. The devotee worships the Lord for the purpose of his satisfaction, not for some material gain. But someone who's a fruitive worker, they'll do worship or they'll do some sacrifice or some yajna because they want some fruit. The problem with that is it's okay to do that, but the problem with that is it eventually it will lead to higher understanding. We see that there's different, in the Vedas, there's different khandas or divisions. There's karma khanda, jnana khanda, upasana khanda. So karma khanda means performing fruitive activities, to get some benefit, personal benefit. Jnana khanda means to contemplate and speculate on knowledge and the conclusions of knowledge. Upasana khanda, upasana means come near, sit down. So basically it means you invite, when you do a yajna or something like that, you invite the Lord to come to sit, please stay so I can worship you. So when initially with the Upasana khanda, it's generally focused on the worship of the devatas, but as one evolves, as one consciousness becomes purified, it leads to the point of worshipping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But it takes a long time to get to that point. So we see even when devotees or when personalities are involved in the karma khanda and jnana khanda, we see there's that verse in the Gita where what's that? How's it go? I remember there was. We were standing on the first time I went to India. We were standing on the train station at Hazrat Nizamuddin. We actually got off the train mistakenly. We thought we were going. That's right. We got on one train. And I was with Subhadra and Lakshmivan. First time I've been to India. I think it was their first time too. And we got on this train, because trains in India can be quite confusing. You can never understand the announcements. It's like the trains in New York. You can never understand the announcements. And so we got on this train, and there's this gentleman there, and he says, "Where are you going?" And he says, "Oh, we're going to Mathura." And he says, "This train will not take you to Mathura." I actually grabbed our bags and jumped off the train as it was going down the thing. And we walked up the train line. We got to Hazrat Nizamuddin, and so we were waiting on the platform, and we kept asking, because we couldn't understand the announcements, in Hindi and stuff. We kept asking people when the train, and they'd say, "Oh, the train will come after 15 minutes." So at that time I was thinking, "Oh, this means in 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes." But then later on I realized what after 15 minutes means. It means I don't really know when it's going to come, but it's not going to be within the next 15 minutes. So we're waiting, and then we're talking. I wound up talking to this yogi on the platform. It was quite an experience, and he quoted this verse. How's it go? Vasudeva Savama, Sa Mahatma Sadulabar, and he was tapping himself on the chest, telling us that he was a great soul. But the point of the verse was that after a long time of this practice, one comes to the point of understanding Vasudeva. Many lifetimes. So the process of jnana khanda or karma khanda or upasana khanda can take many lifetimes till you get to the point of understanding Vasudeva Savamiti. And only a great soul will actually understand the nature of Krishna. But when we take to the process of bhakti, it's very direct. We actually very quickly come to this point of understanding Krishna's nature. And so this is the point that Prabhupada is making here, that ritualistic performances, they will lead ultimately to the point, if one has the proper consciousness, they will ultimately lead to the point of realizing Krishna. But actually to do it quickly, then more is required. And this is the point Prabhupada's making here, is that, but for actual attainment of spiritual knowledge, other qualities are needed. What is essential is vidya. And Prabhupada translates this here as worship, which is really interesting, because if you look at vidya, generally vidya means knowledge, education, self-improvement, things like that. But then if you look at the nature of knowledge, say for instance you want to eat, and you learn that mangoes are the best tasting fruit, what will you do? You'll eat a mango. Because you want to eat some fruit. So you eat a mango. So the same could be used here, this analogy could be used here to understand how worship, vidya is translated as worship. Because if we come to the knowledge to understand that the supreme object of worship and the most beneficial type of worship is to worship Krishna, then this knowledge will bring us to that point. That's how I understand this, is how Prabhupada is using vidya to mean worship, is because when you have proper knowledge, it will bring you to the conclusion that the only person to worship is Krishna. And so we see also in the Madhya Lila, I think it's the 6th chapter of the Madhya Lila towards the end, there's, because the Madhya Lila is talking, it's all focusing on 6 chapters about Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he composed some verses about Lord Chaitanya. And one of the verses he composed, says, Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga Shikshaksham Ekam Purusham Purana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sharira Dari Sharira Kripam Buri Yastam Aham Prabhate. I think I missed a word there. Yeah. So basically what he's saying is Lord Chaitanya, he's descended for the purpose, he's saying, I worship that Supreme Person of God, Lord Chaitanya. He's descended for the purpose of giving knowledge, to teaching knowledge and renunciation. And not just by his words, but by his practical example. We can see, in the conversations that Lord Chaitanya had with Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, with Rupa Goswami, with Sanatana Goswami, with all these great personalities, so much deep, deep knowledge. You look in the I think it's the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th chapters of the Madhya Lila. This is the conversation with Sanatana Goswami, and this is extraordinary knowledge that Lord Chaitanya is imparting to Sanatana Goswami. So he's teaching by his practical example, and he's giving so much knowledge, because by this knowledge we can understand who I am, who is God, what is material nature, and what is my duty in this material world. And without these things, the human life is somewhat meaningless, somewhat purposeless. It has no real meaning. It's not, most people think their life is simply about eat, sleep, mate, defend, and enjoy as much as you can on the way. They spend their days working hard to get money so they can enjoy themselves. But actually, it's not the purpose of life. The purpose of life is to understand who I am. What is my business here in this material world? And this, we've seen the Vedanta Sutra, says Tato Brahma Jigyasa, the very first aphorism of the Vedanta Sutra. And Prabhupada translated that now you have the human form of life, you should come to this point of understanding what is Brahman. I was listening to a class yesterday, a really interesting class, because a Brahmana is one who understands Brahman. If you ask most people what was Arjuna's Varna, they'll say he was a Kshatriya. Prabhupada says he's a Brahmana. Why? Because he understood Brahman. Which I thought that's really interesting, because a Brahmana is one who understands a Brahman. There's was a Brahma iti Brahma janati iti Brahmana. The one who understands Brahman, that is a Brahmana. So according to Prabhupada, Arjuna is actually a Brahmana because he understood Krishna. So it's really, it's quite a lot of information in this short purport here. But essentially what it is explaining to us is we need to cultivate good qualities there's that verse 4:10, I think, Vitaraga Bhayakroda Manmaya Pashita Bahavo Ganatapasa Puta Madbhava Makataha. That many persons that in the past they became purified by this knowledge of me. They performed austerity and they became purified by knowledge of me. And thus they attained me. Krishna makes the point, they attained me. So by cultivating knowledge of Krishna, not just material knowledge, not like you read the Encyclopedia Britannica and you're going to understand Krishna, because it's mundane knowledge, it's material knowledge. But we understand nature, knowledge of the self, we cultivate knowledge of self, we cultivate knowledge of the material world, we cultivate knowledge of Krishna, ultimately. And this will help bring us to the point of realizing Krishna, realizing our position in this material world. And as Prabhupada's talking here, and how the verse is explaining, how he equipped himself with these good qualities, tapasya and worship and dhyan and samadhi, and he was actually able to create the great sages who are his beloved son. And the reason I would think that they're his beloved sons is because primarily Brahma is situated in the mode of goodness. And those in the mode of goodness are very inclined towards knowledge. Sages are focusing on knowledge. They propagate knowledge. So in this sense we can see why they were his. It particularly makes the point here, this abhimana praja, how they're abhimata praja, how they're very, very dear to Lord Brahma. Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions?
That Arjuna is actually a Brahmin.
Yeah.
But also, doesn't he tell Arjuna, Krishna tells Arjuna, don't, try and swap your varna, like perform your activities and what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, but that was in response to Arjuna saying, I just, I don't want to fight this. This is cruel. I shouldn't do it. Sinful, etc. I'm just going to go in the forest and meditate. He says, no, but that's not your varna. One may have a particular duty according to varna. And so his duty as a Kshatriya was to fight. But actually, because he understood Krishna, his real varna was a Brahmana. But externally, his varna was a Kshatriya. So therefore, it was his duty to protect the citizens, to ensure that a religious rule was established. That was his duty. And also because Krishna wanted it, that was also. And this is the point. It's not because he was accepting that he was a Kshatriya, therefore I have to kill. No, he's accepting this because this is what Krishna wants. So that again proves that he was a Brahmana, because he acted according to Krishna's desire, not according to his varna. It may seem externally he acted according to varna, but ultimately he's acting according to Krishna's desire. That's my understanding of it anyhow. Okay. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. The aspect of deep absorption interests me a lot, but it feels very difficult when you have so many services, or sometimes I like to say you have so many things to do, to think about, but this absorption and hearing about the devotees being present in the pastime, it's like, okay.
Sorry?
Like the devotees, they feel like they're actually in the pastime. The absorption is that deep. So.
Yeah. The idea of being in this consciousness where one's, coming to the point of being absorbed in Krishna's pastimes, this is a very, very elevated stage of devotional service. It's not something we can easily achieve. And you kind of gave your answer there in the beginning. You were saying, when we have so many things to do. What does that mean? When we have that consciousness, I've got so much to do. It means I'm in the mode of passion. So if we're influenced by the modes of nature, very difficult to Is this Sagunan Samitetaitan Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate in the 14th chapter. Krishna mentions how, one has to become fixed in this position of being beyond Sagunan, Samatityaitan, beyond the modes of nature, and actually in the transcendental situation. Very, very difficult to do that when we give in to the modes of nature, especially mode of passion. Passion and ignorance. Goodness is helpful because goodness will impel us towards the spiritual nature, ultimately. Lower modes, passion and ignorance, are very, very destructive on our spiritual life. So we and Prabhupada explains that verse, Tadaraja, what is it? In the second chapter of the first canto, Prabhupada gives quite a few classes on that verse. And in there he's explaining how this lust and greediness are very, very difficult to overcome. And as long as we're affected by lust and greediness, it's really difficult to make solid spiritual advancement because they will constantly create problems for us. And it's kind of interesting, I was reflecting on this a few days ago, how we practice the process of devotional service, and it seems like we're removing the anarthas, it seems like we're becoming purified, but then these things surface again. And so it's kind of interesting. I was doing some weeding in the garden at the time when I was reflecting on this. I remember the first service I ever had here on New Govardhana, there used to be some garden, like box garden beds here, along there I think it was. And so one of the first services I ever had was to weed the garden. And it was full of nutgrass because they got all the soil from down the riverside there, which is just full of weeds. So it's full of nutgrass. And it's like nutgrass, I don't know if you know what nutgrass is, but it's a really interesting thing. It's like, it's just got this one thing, it comes up, it's like that, and there'll be another one over there, same thing, the grass comes up. And they're all connected together by roots. So you pull one out, and you can see how the root comes and it's connected to the other one. So you pull them all out, you get the roots and everything, you think, great, I've done it, garden's complete. The weeding's complete. But 3-4 days later, they're all coming up again. Why is that? Because they have these little nuts under the surface, they're attached to the roots, but they stay in the soil when you pull them out. And so removing our anarthas, removing all these obstacles and coming to this point of this dharana and samadhi, it's kind of like that. You have to really burn things up to the root, as it's described in the Brahma Samhita, how by the practice of devotional service it burns up to the root all these material desires, and that includes all the little bits and pieces of there. But until we get to this point of completely removing material desires, and Narottam Das Thakur, he makes that point in one of his songs. He's saying, when will that day come when I can actually enter into Vrindavan? Then he makes the point, when all these desires are when all the material desires are gone, then, only then can I come to the point of entering Sri Vrindavan Dham. So, same for us, it's like, as long as we have material desires, it's going to be very, very difficult for us to enter into dharana and samadhi. And this is why it's described, I was talking about the different stages of Ashtanga Yoga. It's almost like a mechanical process. You start off with yama. Niyama means controlling the senses, removing the objects. Then asana, where you start to be still the mind, still the senses, still the life airs, so you can start to this dharana. Pratyahara you reject, then dharana, so you can start to contemplate the situation, then dhyan, then samadhi. It's a mechanical process, but the process of bhakti is much more direct. By engaging ourselves in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then the senses, the mind, everything becomes purified, and then you can come to the point of actually focusing exclusively on Krishna. Thank you. Anything else? No? Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.